The wind stirred dry earth into the air, a soft ghost trailing the lone wagon as it creaked down the narrow trail toward the outer edge of Sweetwater Ridge. Cole McAllister rode beside it, the leather reins limp in his hands, his horse matching the slow, resigned rhythm of the wheels. The sun hung low and indifferent, casting long blue shadows across the land. Dust clung to his coat, to his boots, to the sharp planes of his jaw, but he didn't notice. He was watching the burlap sacks in the back of the wagon. They moved. He hadn't spoken a word since Sheriff Amos had handed him the reins and muttered, "I figured you'd want to deal with this quiet." The sheriff hadn't lingered. Just nodded once, heavy with meaning, and turned his horse back toward town. Now, with every lurch of the wagon, the weight on Cole's chest thickened. The land was so still it rang in his ears. No birds, no insects, just the soft groan of tired wood and the steady shuffle of hoofs. They weren't sacks of grain. He knew that now. He hadn't believed the note at first. Scrawled in hurried charcoal, folded into a strip of linen and tied to one sack's drawstring. Asterisk. Take them to Cole McAllister. He'll know. Asterisk. No name. No signature. But he'd recognize the curl of the T. Wella. After 2 years, she came back like a whisper. Like a curse. The wheels groaned louder as they crested the ridge near his homestead. Cole pulled back gently, slowing the horses. The ranch sat below, framed by a fence he'd rebuilt with his own hands after the fire last fall. Smoke curled from the chimney. He'd left a log burning that morning before riding out. Now, returning with more than he left with, the house looked different. Smaller. Insufficient. He dismounted, boots thudding against hardened earth. As he approached the wagon bed, something inside him coiled and readied for pain. The sacks weren't tied. Just loosely drawn, as if begging to be opened. His fingers trembled as he peeled back the fabric. The first sack held a child, no older than 2, cheeks chapped, lips cracked. Curled up like a calf in winter. A girl, by the look of the curls matted against her forehead. She whimpered, eyes fluttering open. Hazel. Like Willa's. The second sack held another child, a boy smaller than the girl but with the same wild lashes and brow that furrowed even in sleep. He made no sound, but his tiny fists opened and closed as if grasping something he had long since lost. Cole swallowed hard. Heat rose behind his eyes, and he turned away from them for a moment, pressing his palm to the rim of the wagon. He felt the tremor in his hand, the silent storm he'd kept buried under work and whiskey, and wind now rising like a tide. He gathered both children, one in each arm, and carried them into the house. The door creaked open, and warm air greeted them. He set them gently near the hearth, wrapped them in a quilt made from his mother's old dresses, and went to heat goat's milk over the fire. Everything he did was slow, methodical, hands working like they remembered a rhythm the heart had long since forgotten. When he finally sat between them, feeding them by spoon, he caught his reflection in the stove's iron sheen, gray creeping in at his temples, lines around his mouth from too much silence. "What am I to you?" he whispered aloud. The children blinked up at him, not understanding. But their breaths slowed. Trusting. Waiting. Outside, the wind picked up. A sharp whistle through the cracks in the windowpane, like someone calling from far away. He hadn't spoken her name in 2 winters. Wella Hartley. Sweetwater Ridge hadn't been kind to her. She'd been 17 when she first showed up, riding side saddle on a borrowed mule, lips sunburned, hair wild, chin lifted like she owned the sky. Folks said she was trouble. Cole saw fire. When she started working at the feed store, he made excuses to linger, buying nails he didn't need, asking about prices he already knew. She laughed with her whole mouth, teeth slightly crooked but sincere. When they finally kissed, it was under the cottonwoods during a thunderstorm. She touched his chest and said, "Don't let the world harden you." But the world had other plans. The town turned on her quick. A baby and no ring, a name they never heard her say. Cole had ridden out to find her after she vanished, but never far enough. Pride, pain, maybe something darker had stopped him. He told himself it wasn't his. That she'd chosen to run. Now 2 children with his eyes slept inches from the hearth. As the fire crackled, he found himself staring at the saddle above the mantel. Hers. He hadn't taken it down. Couldn't. It hung there like a ghost he wasn't ready to bury. Cole stood and walked to the desk in the corner. He pulled a paper scrap from a drawer, dipped the quill in ink, and began to write. Wella. He paused. What was there to say that time hadn't already said in scars? Asterisk, if you're still alive, come back. I ain't the man I was, but maybe you aren't the girl they ran off either. No one's got the right to carry shame alone. Not anymore. I see them. And I see you. I always did. Asterisk. He folded the letter once. His fingers hovered over the envelope, then dropped it into the fire. Flames curled it into nothing. It was never meant to be mailed. The twins stirred, the girl murmuring something too soft to catch. Cole crouched beside them, brushing sweat-soaked hair from their brows. They were warmer now. Less gray in their cheeks. The wind paused. Silence fell like snow. Then, the low sound of hooves, faint, distant, but growing clearer. Not many. Just one. Deliberate. Slow. Cole stood, muscles stiff with old injuries, and walked to the porch. The twilight sky was turning violet, the land stretched thin and quiet. Down the trail, a lone rider approached. Wrapped in wool, slumped but steady, the figure rode like someone with nothing left to lose. The horse limped slightly. The rider's face was hidden beneath the shadow of a wide hat. But Cole didn't need to see her eyes to know. Willa had come home. Snow fell in thin threads by the time she reached the porch. Her horse stumbled to a halt, and stood as still as stone, steam rising from its back. Willa dismounted with a shiver rippling through her frame. The wind pressed her skirts against her legs, her boots leaving no sound as she stepped forward. Only weight. So much weight, dragging behind her like those sacks. Cole didn't move at first. He stood in the doorway like a man who'd been waiting so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. Their eyes met, and it was like the air between them cracked. Not from rage. Not from blame. But from something older. Bruised tenderness. Grief that had survived the freeze. I didn't know where else to bring them, Wella said softly, her voice thin as lace. No one else would have opened the door. Cole stepped aside. She entered like someone trespassing on a past life. The smell hit her first, pine smoke, leather, goat's milk. Her gaze fell to the children curled by the fire. The girl stirred, one small hand lifting in her sleep. Wella's breath caught. They're safe, Cole said behind her. Warm. Took milk earlier. Wella sank to her knees, hands hovering above them, afraid to touch. Afraid she'd dissolve. I wanted to carry them. I did. But I ran out of hands. Of mercy. Cole watched her, silent. His hands were tucked into the back pockets of his jeans, but his knuckles were white. She didn't look at him when she spoke again. The sacks weren't meant to be cruel. I wrapped them tight. I told myself they'd be found quick. That someone kind would see them. They had your note. She nodded. There was no one else. The fire crackled, casting light along her cheekbones, hollowed by hunger. Her skin bore the color of old paper, her eyes the dull shine of someone who hadn't slept under a roof in weeks. Cole fetched a blanket from the hook by the door, draped it over her shoulders. She didn't thank him. Not aloud. But her body leaned into the weight of it. How long have you been back in Sweetwater? He asked. She drew her legs beneath her and stared into the flames. Rode through once 2 months back. Slept outside Liddy's barn but never knocked. Didn't think I had the right. She'd have let you in. She'd have had questions. Cole sat across from her, firelight flickering between them like some holy wall. So would I. Her laugh was brittle. I lost track of right and wrong somewhere between hunger and judgment. Those twins, your children, they were born in the mountains. No doctor. Just Snow and me. I named them Hope and Eli. Cole's mouth trembled barely. I kept moving, Willa went on. Every town spat us out. Unwed mother. Filth. I stole bread once. Got chased a mile. Slept in hay. Sang to them even when my voice cracked. I told them their father was a man with strong hands and a stubborn heart. They know nothing about me, Cole whispered. They know I loved you. That's something. Outside, wind whispered through the chinks in the wood. Wella reached into her satchel and pulled something small from its depths, a frayed ribbon with 2 wooden buttons sewn onto the ends. I used this to tie the sacks closed, she said. But I carved our initials on the buttons. I thought maybe if someone found them, they'd see more than cloth. She placed the ribbon on the floor between them. Cole picked it up, thumb brushing over the faded carvings. W_H and C.M, barely legible. They're mine, he said finally. Not as a claim. As a truth spoken aloud for the first time. She nodded, her eyes shining. I never wanted to keep them from you. I just didn't know how to return without carrying the town's spit with me. His voice was low, steady. Let him spit. They did it to me too. When you left, they said you ran off with the peddler. Said I was a fool for believing otherwise. I started believing them, Wella. Started hating you just to survive the winter. Her face twisted, a quiet wound opening in her chest. I thought if I came back, you'd slam the door. He stood slowly, walked past her, and picked up the saddle still hanging by the mantel. Willa stared at it, tears slipping free. You left this, he said. I didn't touch it. Figured it was your choice if it ever came off the wall. She looked at her hands. I didn't want to be a ghost. I wanted to come back whole. But I only had sacks. Not dignity. He came to her slowly, like approaching a startled colt. When he knelt, his hands reached forward, not to touch her, but to open his palm. An offering. Let's start with the pieces. We can make something new from those. She placed her hand in his. In the silence that followed, the children stirred. Hope whimpered. Willa shifted toward her, but Cole was already there, lifting the girl into his arms. He cradled her like a man long denied the right. She's strong, he said. Like her mother. Willa looked away, throat tight. I'm not strong. Just stubborn. He smiled, a sad, softened thing. Same thing, far as I can tell. Later, the 4 of them sat at the hearth. No declarations. No grand apologies. Just fire, and breath, and the quiet sound of beginning again. Morning came slow, gentle as a hymn. Willa stepped outside to fetch water, cloak pulled tight. As she reached the well, she heard it, the sharp crack of a voice in the distance. She's back, someone hissed. The harlot. Willa turned, shoulders stiff, face unreadable. A group of women stood near the chapel fence. Watching. Miss Liddy walked past them with her basket and paused before Willa. She offered a nod. Then slowly, deliberately, placed a fresh loaf of bread in her hands. You'll need this, she said. The mouths to feed don't stop just 'cause shame tries to knock. Willa couldn't speak. Could only nod as Liddy turned and walked away. But the others didn't move. The judgment held. Cole stepped out behind her then, shirt sleeves rolled, axe slung over one shoulder. He didn't say a word. Just stood beside Willa and looked at the women until they turned their eyes elsewhere. That night, Willa tucked the twins into their quilts, one hand lingering on each tiny chest. Cole watched from the doorway. She looked up at him, eyes damp but clear. I can't undo what I did. He stepped inside, voice rough. I'm not asking you to. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. Placed it in his hand. A gold ring. I kept it, she said. Even when my fingers were too cold to wear it. He held it, staring. Then slipped it into his own pocket. He didn't put it on. Not yet. But he didn't give it back either.